The Walking Dead is one of those shows that got inside people's heads and never really left. It ran for over a decade on AMC, spawned half a dozen spin-offs, sold millions of comic books, and at its peak, it was pulling in 17 million viewers a week. That's more than most sporting events. And when a show captures that many imaginations for that long, something interesting starts to happen. People don't just watch it anymore. They start picking it apart. They start connecting dots that may or may not actually be there. They start building theories. And over the years, the Walking Dead fan base has produced some of the most creative, well-researched, and occasionally completely insane fan theories that the internet has ever seen. We're talking Reddit threads with thousands of upvotes, YouTube videos that racked up hundreds of thousands of views, entire communities of people dedicated to a single idea about what really happened in a scene that lasted 4 seconds. So tonight, I thought we'd go through as many of these fan theories as I could possibly find. I've spent a long time scouring every corner of the internet for these, from Reddit threads dating back to 2012, all the way through to articles and forum posts from just this past year, and I've arranged them into an iceberg, 3 layers deep. The well-known theories that almost every Walking Dead fan has heard of sit at the top, in layer 1. The more obscure and niche theories are down in layer 2, and the truly strange, deep-cut, almost unbelievable theories are all the way down in layer 3. Now before we get started, a couple of things. This video obviously contains spoilers for The Walking Dead and its various spin-off shows, so if you're still working your way through any of those, just keep that in mind. And I am not the creator of any of these theories. I'm just the person relaying them to you. Some of these are brilliant, some of them are a reach, and a few of them are so far out there that you'll wonder how anyone even thought of them. But that's what makes this fun. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's start at the surface of the iceberg with layer 1. The first theory on our list was one of the biggest in the Walking Dead fan community for years, really gaining traction around 2012 and building momentum all the way through seasons 6 and 7 after several popular YouTube channels made videos about it. And the concept was actually pretty elegant in its simplicity. The theory suggested that the entire Walking Dead series, everything we watched across all 11 seasons, was actually a story being told by an elderly Carl Grimes. The idea was that Carl had survived the apocalypse, grown old, had children of his own, and was now sitting down with his kids, who would of course be Rick Grimes' grandchildren, and recounting his memories of what life was like during the early years of the zombie apocalypse. Think of it like How I Met Your Mother, where the whole show is framed as one character telling a story to their children about the past. Except instead of dating mishaps in New York City, it's walkers and survival and the collapse of civilization. And honestly, it worked. The Walking Dead always had this undercurrent of being a coming-of-age story wrapped inside a horror series. We watched Carl grow from a scared kid clinging to his father's side into a young man who had seen and done things no child should ever have to. The show was, in many ways, about him inheriting a broken world and trying to find meaning in it. So the idea that one day, as an old man, he'd sit down and tell his grandchildren about those years, about his father, about the people they lost, about what it took to survive. It was actually a really beautiful concept, and for a long time it held up. There was no reason it couldn't be true. Carl was alive, the story was ongoing, and the theory kept growing. Multiple YouTube videos dissecting the concept gathered hundreds of thousands of views, and it became one of those theories that even casual fans were aware of. But then came February 25th, 2018, Season 8, Episode 9. The episode was titled Honor, and it changed everything. In that episode, it was revealed that Carl Grimes had been bitten by a walker. And not just bitten in a way that could be amputated or treated. This was a death sentence, and in that very same episode, Carl took his own life, choosing to go out on his own terms, rather than let the virus take him. The Walking Dead fan base was absolutely devastated. Carl was supposed to be the future. In the comics, Carl survives. He grows up. He becomes a leader. The show had been building toward that for years, and in one episode, it was all gone. And along with Carl, this theory died too. Some fans tried to adjust it, suggesting that maybe it was actually Judith Grimes telling the story, instead of Carl, since she was still alive and would grow up in this world. But the truth is, after Carl's death, the energy behind this theory just faded. People moved on. The magic of the original concept was tied specifically to Carl, and without him, it didn't carry the same weight. It remains one of the most nostalgic and bittersweet fan theories in the show's history, a hopeful vision of the future that the writers chose not to give us. Now, moving on from that, there's another theory that fascinated fans from the very early days of the show, and it has to do with the walkers themselves. Specifically, the idea that they would eventually just rot away and stop being a threat entirely. And on paper, this makes total sense. Walkers are dead bodies. They're corpses that have been reanimated by the wildfire virus, but they're still fundamentally made of flesh, bone and tissue, all of which are subject to decomposition. In the real world, a body left out in the elements will begin to break down within days. Insects, bacteria, weather, all of these things accelerate decay. So theoretically, the walkers should be falling apart. Limbs should be dropping off. Muscles should be deteriorating to the point where they can barely move. And eventually, after enough time passes, you'd be left with nothing but skeletons and dust. The show has occasionally hinted at this idea. Over the years, we've seen walkers that are almost fused into their environments, barely functional creatures that are more scenery than threat. There are the sleeper variants, walkers that appear completely dormant until something disturbs them. And in general, the walkers we see in later seasons do tend to look more degraded than the ones from season 1. But here's the problem. These instances feel like exceptions, not the rule. Despite the fact that we are now well over a decade into the apocalypse in the show's timeline, the vast majority of walkers we see on screen are still fully functional. They can walk, they can grab, they can bite, and they look more or less the same as walkers we saw 8 or 9 years earlier in the story. I mean, Daryl Dixon's season 3 is airing right now, and the walkers in that show look perfectly capable. They're not decomposing into piles of bones. They're still a genuine, active threat. So while the idea of walkers slowly dying out was a fascinating theory early on, especially because it was grounded in actual science, the show has pretty clearly moved away from it. And when you think about it, that makes sense from a storytelling perspective too. The Walking Dead is, at its core, a zombie show. If you remove the zombies entirely, you're left with a character drama. And while the character work has always been the heart of the show, you still need the walkers to create the tension and the stakes that drive everything forward. So this theory, while scientifically sound, was never really going to come true. And honestly, looking back, I think that's probably for the best. Now, the third theory on our iceberg is one that has been a genuine mystery within the Walking Dead universe for years, and it revolves around the disappearance of a character named Heath. Heath was played by actor Corey Hawkins, and he was introduced in season 6 of the show as a supply runner from Alexandria. He was a good character, well liked by fans, and based on a fan favourite character from the comics. But in season 7, episode 6, an episode called Swear, something strange happened. Heath and Tara were out on a 2-week supply run, looking for weapons and ammunition, when they were ambushed by a horde of walkers on a bridge. Tara fell off the bridge and ended up at Oceanside, but when she eventually made it back to where she last saw Heath, he was gone. All that was left behind were his broken glasses and a small card with 3 letters printed on it. P, 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 and that was it. Heath just vanished. No explanation, no follow-up within the show itself. For years, fans speculated wildly about what had happened to him. Was he dead? Had he been taken by someone? What did PPP mean? Now, the real-world explanation is fairly straightforward. Corey Hawkins had signed on for other projects, including the 2017 film Kong Skull Island, and he needed to leave the show. But within the story, his disappearance was left completely unresolved for a long time. It wasn't until November 2018 that we got any kind of answer, and it came not from the show itself, but from an interview. Showrunner Angela Kang confirmed to the publication Insider that Heath was alive and had been taken by Jadis, the leader of the Scavengers, that junkyard-dwelling group we met in Season 7. According to Kang, Jadis had traded Heath to the Civic Republic Military, the CRM, in exchange for supplies. This is the same shadowy organisation that would later abduct Rick Grimes at the end of Season 9, flying him away in a helicopter. So Heath and Rick essentially suffered the same fate, taken by the same group, traded by the same woman. The parallels are striking, and the mysteries didn't stop there. The PPP card that Tara found at the bridge showed up again in Tales of the Walking Dead, in Episode 5, where a character named Darwin was shown carrying the same type of card. And in the finale of The Ones Who Live, eagle-eyed viewers spotted the letters PPP on a whiteboard at a CRM facility with a note reading PPP Exception. Nobody knows for certain what PPP stands for. It's one of the longest-running unsolved mysteries in the entire franchise. Fan theories about Heath have ranged from the plausible to the wild. Some thought he was being experimented on inside the CRM as part of their Project Votus research program, which used live human subjects to study reanimation. Others speculated he'd risen through the ranks and become a military figure within the Civic Republic. Some just hoped he'd make a cameo in one of the many spin-offs. But as of right now, Heath has never appeared on screen again. It's been nearly 9 years since we last saw him, and while showrunner Scott Gimple once said that we had definitely not seen the last of Heath, it's looking increasingly unlikely that his story will ever be properly resolved. It's one of The Walking Dead's biggest loose ends, and it still generates discussion on Reddit and fan forums to this day. The PPP mystery alone could fill its own iceberg. Now, the fourth theory in our first layer is one that involves a character named Sadiq and the Whisperer War, and it's a theory that actually turned out to be partially correct, just not in the way people expected. So here's the setup. In Season 9 of The Walking Dead, there's an episode called The Calm Before, and it contains one of the most horrific scenes in the entire series. Alpha, the leader of the Whisperers, along with her group, captures and decapitates multiple members of the Alexandria community. Among the victims are Tara, Henry, Enid, and several others. Their heads are placed on pikes along the border as a warning. But one person who was present during this massacre was left alive, Sadiq. And in the show, it's explained that the Whisperers spared him specifically so that he could return to Alexandria and spread the message of what had happened. He was left alive to be a messenger of fear. After this traumatic event, Sadiq begins suffering from severe PTSD, which is completely understandable given what he witnessed. But fans noticed something else going on. They started to wonder if maybe Sadiq's survival wasn't just about spreading a message. Maybe there was more to it. Maybe Alpha had forced Sadiq into some kind of deal, sparing his life in exchange for his cooperation. The theory went like this. Alpha forced Sadiq to actually participate in the decapitations himself. In exchange, she let him live. And from that point forward, Sadiq was essentially a mole inside Alexandria, feeding information to the Whisperers. And there was some interesting evidence to support this. In a scene from Season 10, Sadiq is operating on Carol, and when he reaches for a scalpel, he suddenly has a vivid flashback. He sees a bloody blade and hears Alpha's voice saying the word "good" ringing around in his head. Theorists took this as confirmation that Sadiq had been present during the killings in a more active capacity than the show had let on. that the word good was Alpha's reaction to Sadik doing something terrible. On top of this, people pointed out that during the Whisperer War, Alexandria's borders were crossed by the Whisperers 3 separate times. But the Whisperers only physically observed one of those 3 crossings themselves, which meant that for the other 2 times someone from inside Alexandria would have had to tip them off, and the theory pointed the finger at Sadik. Now here's the thing, the theory was actually right about the core idea. There was a spy inside Alexandria. The theorists correctly identified that someone was feeding the Whisperers information from the inside, but they accused the wrong person. The real spy turned out to be Dante, a character who was revealed later in Season 10 to have been a Whisperer infiltrator all along. And when you think about it, Sadik being the traitor never really made sense with his character arc. This was the person that Carl Grimes sacrificed his own life to save. Carl went out into the woods, found Sadik, helped him, and it cost Carl everything. If Sadik had then turned around and betrayed the community that Carl died for, it would have completely undermined Carl's entire message. The idea that helping strangers and showing mercy is what makes life worth living in this new world. I don't think the writers would have done that to Carl's legacy. But the theory does deserve credit for one thing. It correctly predicted that there was a Whisperer spy inside Alexandria before the show revealed it. And the evidence about the border crossings was genuinely compelling. Sometimes a theory can be wrong about the details, but right about the big picture. And this is a perfect example of that. So that wraps up the first 4 theories of our iceberg. We've covered the elderly Carl narration theory, the idea that walkers would eventually rot away, the mystery of Heath's disappearance and the PPP card, and the theory that Sadik was a Whisperer spy. All of these sit at the surface level, the well-known theories that circulated widely throughout the fan community, but the iceberg goes deeper than this. And as we move into the next batch of theories, things start to get a little more interesting, a little more creative, and in some cases, a little more emotional. The next theory on the iceberg involves one of the show's most memorable characters, and that's Eugene Porter. When Eugene was first introduced to us in Season 4 of The Walking Dead, he came with a bold claim. He said he was a scientist and that he knew the cure to the wildfire virus. He said he needed to get to Washington, D.C. to deliver this information to the people who could act on it, and that everything depended on him making it there alive. And for a while, a good chunk of the audience believed him. He certainly talked like a scientist. He used big words, spoke in long, meandering sentences, and had a confidence about his intellect that made it seem plausible. But a lot of fans, especially those who had read the comics, could see right through Eugene from the beginning. They called it early. They said he was lying, that there was no cure, and that Eugene was using this story as a survival mechanism to keep people protecting him. And they were proven right in Season 5, Episode 5, an episode titled Self-Help, where the truth finally came out. Eugene admitted that he had fabricated the entire thing. He wasn't a scientist. He didn't have a cure. He was just a man who was terrified of dying alone and figured that if he made himself seem indispensable, other people would keep him alive. And that should have been the end of it. But some fans took the theory in a completely different direction. They created what I'd call the Eugene really did know theory, and it's one of the more creative stretches on this iceberg. The theory goes like this: Eugene actually did know the cure, or at least had a legitimate scientific framework for one, but he chose to lie about lying. He told the group he was a fraud because he had decided he didn't want to pursue the cure after all. He'd found a family in Abraham, Rosita, and the rest of the group. He preferred his life in the apocalypse to whatever miserable existence he had before, and he was terrified that if a cure actually existed and people found out he had it, he'd be exploited, kidnapped, or worse. So confessing to being a liar was actually his second survival strategy. The first lie got him protection. The second lie, the one where he said he was lying the whole time, got him freedom from the burden of being the most important person in the world. The theory also suggests that Eugene was afraid a cure could be weaponized, that it could be used as leverage by groups like the Saviors or the CRM to control populations. By keeping the cure to himself, he was actually protecting everyone in a weird roundabout way. Now, I'll be honest, I think this theory is a massive stretch. There is essentially zero evidence for it in the show, and it requires you to believe that Eugene quietly watched thousands of people die across 11 seasons while holding the answer in his head the whole time. That's not just morally questionable, it's borderline sociopathic, and it doesn't fit the character we see on screen at all. Eugene grows into someone who genuinely cares about people. The idea that he'd let all that suffering happen when he could stop it just doesn't track. But I'll give credit to the people who came up with it, because it's an inventive piece of fan fiction, even if it never held water as an actual theory. The next theory takes us over to the spin-off world, specifically to Fear the Walking Dead, and it concerns a character named Travis Manawa. Travis was one of the central characters in the first 2 seasons of Fear, played by actor Cliff Curtis. He was the moral compass of the Clark family, a good man trying to do right in a world that had gone completely sideways. But in the season 3 premiere, an episode called The New Frontier, Travis was unexpectedly killed off. He was shot in the neck while aboard a helicopter and then fell from the aircraft to his apparent death. The real reason for his departure was that Cliff Curtis had signed on for the Avatar sequels, a franchise commitment that would keep him busy for years, so he asked to be written out. Now, in the show itself, there was very little closure surrounding Travis's death. For such an important character, the other characters seemed to move past it remarkably quickly, and this rubbed a lot of Fear fans the wrong way. They didn't feel like they got a proper goodbye, and that lack of closure led to a wave of theories that Travis might not actually be dead. And to be fair to those fans, Fear the Walking Dead had a pretty terrible track record when it came to keeping characters dead. Daniel Salazar survived being trapped inside a burning building. He then survived being shot in the mouth. Madison Clark, who seemingly died at the end of Season 4, was brought back in Season 7. Troy Otto, who was hit in the head multiple times with a hammer by Madison and then caught in an explosion at a dam, somehow showed up alive in a later season. So the precedent was there. In the world of Fear the Walking Dead, death was more of a suggestion than a rule. When The Ones Who Live was announced, Fear fans really started to spiral. A photoshopped image of Cliff Curtis wearing CRM military gear circulated online, and it looked convincing enough to fuel a wave of speculation. People theorized that Travis fell into a body of water after dropping from the helicopter, survived the impact, was found and rescued by a nearby community, recovered from his injuries, and eventually joined the CRM, where he became friends with Rick Grimes. Obviously, none of that happened. Travis did not appear in The Ones Who Live or in any other Walking Dead project since his death in 2017. And according to the show's production notes and wiki pages, his injuries were a gunshot wound to the neck and another to the stomach. There was no walker bite, which means he wasn't infected, but a fall from a helicopter at altitude is about as close to certain death as you can get, without technically confirming it. Still, there's a small stubborn corner of the fan base that insists Travis is alive somewhere out there in the Walking Dead universe. And while I personally think that's a huge reach, I also remember that Troy Otto survived a hammer to the skull and a dam explosion, so honestly, who even knows anymore? Moving along, the next theory is one of my personal favourites because it blends real-world science with the fictional world of the show in a really interesting way. And it's the theory that all children born after Monument Day, meaning after the fall of civilization, are totally immune to the wildfire virus. Throughout the entire 11-season run of The Walking Dead, we never once see a child who was born after the outbreak die and then reanimate as a walker. Not once. Judith Grimes, Herschel Rhee, the various babies born at the communities throughout the show, none of them are ever shown turning, and fans noticed this pattern early on, leading to the theory that babies born in the apocalypse carry some form of natural immunity. The science behind it is actually pretty interesting. In the real world, there's a well-documented phenomenon where pregnant women who are infected with certain viruses will produce antibodies to fight that virus, and those antibodies can be passed to the baby during pregnancy or through breastfeeding. This means the child is born with a degree of protection against the virus that infected their mother. It's called passive immunity, and it's a real thing. Applying this to The Walking Dead, the theory suggests that since every living person carries the dormant wildfire virus, pregnant women's bodies may produce antibodies against it, and those antibodies are transferred to the baby. The result is that children born after the outbreak are either completely immune to the virus, or at the very least, they are born without the dormant virus in their system, meaning they wouldn't reanimate after a natural death. For years, this theory held up perfectly. There was simply no evidence against it. But then came Fear the Walking Dead Season 8, and a character named Finch. Finch was the son of Dwight and Sherry, born after the outbreak, and in that final season, Finch was bitten by a walker, became infected, and eventually died from the illness. This definitively proved that children born after Monument Day are not completely immune to the active virus transmitted through bites. However, and this is important, it doesn't fully disprove the broader theory, because while Finch succumbed to a walker bite, we still haven't seen what happens when a post-Monument Day child dies of natural causes. Would they reanimate, or would they simply die because they were born without the dormant virus in their system? That question remains unanswered across the entire franchise, so this theory exists in a fascinating grey area. It's been partially disproven, but the core of it, the idea that children born after the outbreak might be fundamentally different from adults when it comes to the virus, is still very much alive as a possibility. Now, the next theory is a small one, but it's one of the most emotionally resonant on the entire Iceberg, and it's about Carl Grimes and his hair. Throughout the first 2 seasons of the show, Carl had a standard short haircut, the kind of thing you'd expect a kid growing up in a small town in Georgia to have. His mother, Laurie, was the one who cut his hair, and then in season 3, Laurie died during childbirth, and from that point forward, Carl's hair started growing out, and it kept growing, through season 4, season 5, all the way through to his death in season 8, Carl never got a haircut. The theory is simple and beautiful. Carl refused to cut his hair after Laurie's death because she was always the one who did it. It was one of those small, domestic, normal things that connected him to his mother and to the world that existed before. And after she was gone, cutting his hair would have felt like letting go of one more piece of her. So he just didn't. Now there is a practical behind-the-scenes explanation for the long hair. In 2016, showrunner Scott Gimple asked actor Chandler Riggs to grow out his hair during the production of season 6. The longer hair helped cover up bandages and made the CGI work easier for the episode No Way Out, which is when Carl loses his right eye. So from a production standpoint, there was a very mundane reason for it. But that only explains season 6 and onward. It doesn't explain seasons 3 through 5, where Carl's hair was already noticeably longer and going uncut, and within the story of the show, nobody ever comments on it or offers to cut it for him. It's just this quiet, unspoken detail that sits there in the background. I think this theory is probably true, at least in spirit. Whether or not the writers consciously intended it, the visual storytelling supports it perfectly. Carl's growing hair becomes a subtle, ongoing tribute to his mother. And the fact that it's never explicitly addressed in the show actually makes it more affecting, not less. It's the kind of detail that rewards close watching, and it adds a layer of emotional depth to Carl's character that makes his eventual death hit even harder. It's a small theory, but it might be my favourite one on this entire iceberg. Now, the last theory before we transition deeper into the iceberg is arguably one of the most legendary fan theories in the entire Walking Dead franchise, and it concerns the Whisperers, specifically the theory that the Whisperers appeared in the show years before their official introduction in Season 9. There are two parts to this theory, and they involve two different seasons. The first part is set in Season 2, in the episode 18 Miles Out. There's a scene in this episode where Shane is sitting in the car, looking out the window, and he sees a lone walker wandering through an open field. The scene is clearly meant as symbolism. Shane himself is isolated from the group at this point. He's emotionally and ideologically separated from Rick and the others. He's still physically with them at the farm, but mentally he's drifting further and further away. The lone walker in the field mirrors his loneliness and disconnection. But the theory suggests that what Shane saw wasn't a walker at all. It was actually an early version of Beta, the Whisperer lieutenant from Seasons 9 and 10, disguised in walker skin and wandering the countryside before he'd even encountered Alpha or joined the group. Now I'll be honest, this one is pretty far-fetched. Beta is established as being from Maryland, which would put him roughly 700 miles from where Shane is in Georgia. The timelines also don't match up. Shane sees the lone figure somewhere between day 83 and day 86 of the apocalypse, and during that time, Beta was supposedly taking refuge in a survivor camp and then holing up in an abandoned hospital. For this theory to work, Beta would have had to leave his camp, put on a suit, which is not exactly practical apocalypse attire, and walk for 2 weeks straight to end up in a random field in Georgia. There's just no logical reason for it. The second part of the theory is much more compelling, and it takes place in Season 3. In the episode Clear, Rick, Michonne, and Carl travel back to Rick's hometown and encounter Morgan Jones, who has completely lost his mind. Morgan has barricaded himself inside buildings, written strange messages on the walls, and set elaborate traps everywhere. He's clearly been through something terrible. And during a tense conversation with Rick, Morgan says something that caught the attention of every theorist who was paying close attention. He talks about people wearing dead people's faces. Now, in the context of the scene, this is easy to dismiss. Morgan is clearly unstable. He's been alone for a long time, grieving the death of his son Dwayne, and he's not making a lot of sense. So most viewers wrote off the dead people's faces comment as the ramblings of a broken man. But the theory suggests that Morgan wasn't insane at all, or at least not about this specific thing. What if Morgan had actually encountered an early version of the Whisperers? What if, during his time alone, he had come across people disguised in walker skin, moving among the dead, and it was that experience that helped push him over the edge? The theory extends this idea to the character of Lizzie as well. Lizzie, as you might remember, was the young girl who became dangerously obsessed with walkers, believing they were still people. She was so convinced of this that she murdered her own sister, Mika, because she thought Mika would come back and be better off as a walker. It was one of the most disturbing storylines in the entire show, but the theory proposes an explanation for Lizzie's beliefs. Before she joined Rick's group at the prison, Lizzie was out in the wilderness, and the theory suggests she encountered the Whisperers during their early, passive phase, back when they were a quiet group led by a woman named Hera, before Alpha took over. Lizzie watched these people move among walkers, whispering to each other, completely unharmed. And her young mind interpreted this as proof that walkers were actually people. She didn't understand the disguises. She just saw what looked like humans and walkers coexisting peacefully, and it warped her entire understanding of reality. This theory was so well constructed, so thoroughly supported by moments in the show, and so convincing in its logic that Robert Kirkman, the creator of the Walking Dead comics, actually had to come out publicly and disprove it. He confirmed that the Whisperers were not even a concept when Seasons 2 and 3 were being produced. They didn't exist yet, not in the show, and not even in the comics at that point. But the fact that the creator of the entire franchise felt the need to personally step in and say, no, that's not what happened, tells you everything about how good this theory was. It connected dots across multiple seasons, used real dialogue and character behaviour as evidence, and presented a narrative that genuinely made more sense than what the show actually intended. It's one of the most legendary fan theories in Walking Dead history. And honestly, even knowing it's been debunked, a part of me still wishes it were true. And with that, we've covered the main theories that sit at the surface of our iceberg. The well-known ones. The theories that almost every Walking Dead fan has encountered at some point. But the surface is only the beginning. The iceberg goes much deeper than this. And as we descend into layer 2, the theories become more obscure, more unusual, and in some cases, a lot more creative. So let's keep going. Before we descend into layer 2, there are a couple more surface level theories worth covering, starting with one that I'm sure you've heard of in some form, because honestly, every major franchise has its own version of this theory. The Rick Grimes coma theory. The idea is about as simple as it gets. Everything we watched across 11 seasons of The Walking Dead, every death, every battle, every community built and destroyed, was all a dream. None of it was real. Rick Grimes has been lying in his hospital bed at Harrison Memorial Hospital the entire time, still in the coma he fell into after being shot in the pilot episode, and every single event in the series is a product of his unconscious mind. I'm sure you've heard variations of this kind of theory before. Ash Ketchum dreamed all of Pokemon while in a coma. Abed imagined everything in Community. The kid from Saint Elsewhere was staring at a snow globe the whole time. It's one of those narrative tropes that gets applied to pretty much every beloved piece of fiction at some point, and The Walking Dead is no exception. Robert Kirkman, the creator of the comics, addressed this one directly. He said plain and simple that Rick is not still in a coma, and that the events of The Walking Dead are definitely happening. And honestly, even without that confirmation, the theory doesn't hold up on its own. Rick Grimes leaves the show in season 9, but the story continues without him for 2 more seasons, and across multiple spin-offs. If it's all Rick's dream, then who's dreaming seasons 10 and 11? It falls apart pretty quickly when you pull at the threads, but it's one of those theories that will never fully go away because it's just so easy to pitch. What if none of it was real? Is the kind of question that will always generate a discussion, even when the answer is clearly, no, it was real, the creator literally told us so. There's another Grimes family theory that's worth mentioning, and this one is a lot more interesting. When Fear the Walking Dead launched in 2015, fans immediately started speculating that the lead character, Madison Clark, was somehow related to Rick Grimes. Whether she was a cousin, or maybe even Rick's sister, people were convinced that the 2 shows would eventually merge and the family connection would be revealed. I remember hearing this on podcasts and seeing it debated in Reddit threads constantly during Fear's first couple of seasons. That theory eventually died a quiet death as the shows progressed and no connection was ever established. But a more intriguing version of it lives on to this day, and it involves a character from the comics named Jeffrey Grimes. Jeffrey Grimes is Rick's brother. He appears in a single comic book issue titled The Alien, and the story reveals that Jeffrey travelled to Barcelona, Spain, and was unable to return to America because of the travel restrictions caused by the outbreak. Now, interestingly, Rick never mentions having a brother anywhere in the television series. He does, however, suggest in season 2 that he has a sister, which has never been properly addressed or followed up on. And here's where it gets coincidental. The spin-off show Daryl Dixon has taken Daryl to France and is now venturing into Spain, the exact country where Jeffrey Grimes is stranded in the comics. So there's a segment of the fan base that believes we might see Jeffrey Grimes, or perhaps a television version of Rick's unnamed sister, show up in Daryl Dixon at some point. Would it happen? Probably not. But the coincidence of Daryl ending up in Spain, the same country where Rick's comic book brother is stuck, is genuinely remarkable. and it would be a brilliant way to bring some comic book lore into the television universe in a meaningful way. I'm a fan of this theory, even if I don't think it'll ever come true. One more from the surface layer. When our group was making their way to Terminus at the end of Season 4, nobody knew what to expect. In the comics, the story had moved past the prison arc and into new territory, but Terminus was a completely original creation for the television series. It didn't appear in the source material at all, which meant that for the first time in the show's history, even the comic book readers were going in blind. And during that period of uncertainty, a massive theory developed that Terminus was connected to Negan. People thought that maybe Negan was running Terminus, or that Terminus was some kind of saviour outpost. A baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire appeared in a Season 4 scene, looking remarkably like Negan's iconic weapon, Lucille, and that sent people into overdrive. Some fans went even further and theorised that a crazed man Rick and the group encountered inside Terminus was actually Negan himself, suggesting the character would be introduced and killed off as an Easter egg rather than a full antagonist. The showrunners shut this down quickly, confirming that the man killed in the episode No Sanctuary was absolutely not Negan. And of course, Negan wouldn't actually appear on the show until the Season 6 finale, The Last Day on Earth, in what became one of the most memorable villain introductions in television history. But for a brief window of time in 2014 and 2015, the Terminus-Negan connection was one of the hottest theories in the fandom. Alright, now we're going to descend into the second layer of the iceberg. The theories from here get more obscure, more niche, and in a lot of cases, more creative. These aren't the ones that everyone's heard of. These are the ones that require a closer eye, a deeper knowledge of the show, and sometimes a willingness to look at things from an angle that you wouldn't normally think of. Let's start with something subtle. In the Season 7 premiere, an episode called The Day Will Come When You Won't Be, there's a dream sequence near the end. It's an extended fantasy scene where we see our group sitting around a dinner table in Alexandria, eating together, smiling, happy. It's meant to depict an idealized version of the future, the peaceful ending that these characters deserve, but may never actually get. But in this dream sequence, something strange happens. Morgan Jones, who is sitting at the table, seemingly puts out 2 candles. There are 6 candles on the table, and Morgan extinguishes exactly 2 of them, while everyone else continues eating and talking and smiling. The theory is that those 2 candles represent Glenn and Abraham, the 2 characters who were brutally killed by Negan earlier in that same episode. Morgan putting out the flames was a subtle visual hint at the 2 deaths that had just occurred. And when you go back and watch the scene, it's hard to dismiss this as pure coincidence. Morgan is the only person at the table who isn't smiling or engaging with the others. He's separate, somber, almost disconnected from the joy around him. And then he just reaches over and puts out exactly 2 candles, for no apparent reason. The show never explains it. It's just a strange, quiet moment in an otherwise happy scene. I think there's a genuine chance this was intentional on the part of the filmmakers. At the very least, it's one of the most interesting coincidences in the entire series. Now, the next theory is one of the longest running in the entire Walking Dead fan community, and it suggests that Rick Grimes himself is immune to the wildfire virus. This theory has been floating around since 2010, essentially since the show began, but it really picked up steam around 2023 when a YouTube channel called Clash PR made several videos about it that gathered hundreds of thousands of views. And when The Ones Who Live was announced, speculation intensified further, with people theorizing that the reason the CRM was holding Rick wasn't just because he was useful, but because they had discovered he was immune and were studying him. The theory has 2 branches. The simpler version goes like this. When Rick was shot and put into a coma before the outbreak, he was hooked up to IV drips and life support machines in the hospital. These machines kept his body functioning while he was unconscious, but they also meant that Rick was breathing filtered air, receiving fluids intravenously, and essentially sealed off from the outside environment during the critical period when the wildfire virus went airborne and infected the global population. So when Rick eventually woke up, he may have been one of the only people on the planet who never breathed in the virus. He's not infected like everyone else. He's clean. The wilder version of the theory takes it a step further. When Shane rushed into the hospital to save Rick and the power went out, he put his head to Rick's chest and couldn't hear a heartbeat. Now, Shane was a trained law enforcement officer, certified in first aid, so him not hearing a heartbeat is significant. In that moment, for all intents and purposes, Rick was dead. But if Rick was dead even briefly, how did he wake up from his coma? The theory proposes that the dormant wildfire virus, the same virus that reanimates dead bodies, actually kick-started Rick's brain. But instead of turning him into a walker, it brought him back as a fully functional human being. Rick essentially died and was resurrected by the virus, meaning he's technically already gone through the reanimation process and come out the other side. He is, in a sense, a walker who beat the virus. If this were true, it would mean that Rick is functionally immune to walker bites. The virus can't turn him because it already tried and failed. And people who subscribe to this theory point to all the near-death experiences Rick survived over the years as evidence. Getting impaled by a metal pole in Season 9, getting blown up on a bridge, surviving the CRM for years. The man just doesn't die. Now, Rick's immunity was never addressed in The Ones Who Live, which you'd think it would have been if it were actually part of the story. So I don't think the writers ever intended this to be canon. But the theory is clever. It uses real evidence from the show, and it's survived for over a decade, which makes it one of the most enduring fan theories in the franchise. The orange backpack theory is the next one, and it's one of the most creative entries on this entire iceberg, because it's not about a character at all, it's about an item. The orange backpack first appears in Season 3, Episode 12. Rick, Michonne and Carl are driving down a road when they pass a man desperately trying to flag them down. He's a hitchhiker, alone, scared, carrying an orange backpack, and our group drives right past him. They ignore him completely. Later, on their way back, they see the man's remains on the side of the road. He's been killed by walkers, and there, sitting next to what's left of him, is the orange backpack. Rick pulls over, grabs the backpack, throws it in the trunk, and drives away. That backpack would go on to appear multiple times throughout the series. It's passed from character to character, and fans started to notice a disturbing pattern. Every character who was shown wearing or carrying the orange backpack ended up dying. The hitchhiker died. The backpack went to the group. Glenn was later seen with it. Glenn died. Carl had it at one point. Carl died. The pattern seemed cursed, and fans dubbed it the orange backpack curse, a quiet omen of death that the writers had woven into the background of the show. And then the backpack ended up in Daryl Dixon's possession, and people lost their minds. The If Daryl Dies We Riot movement, which had already been a huge part of the fan community, kicked into an even higher gear. People genuinely believed the writers were telegraphing Daryl's death through this prop. But Daryl didn't die. He became the first person to carry the orange backpack and survive. Virgil, the last person seen with the backpack in Season 10, also survived, and the backpack hasn't been spotted in the universe since. What I love about this theory is the level of attention it required. Someone had to notice a single prop appearing across multiple seasons, track which characters had it, and then correlate it with their fates. That takes genuine dedication and a sharp eye. And for a stretch of the show, the theory was actually correct. Every backpack carrier did die. The writers may have even been aware of the theory, which is probably why they gave it to Daryl, just to mess with the audience. It's one of the best fan theories the show ever produced, and it's a perfect example of how closely this fan base pays attention to the smallest details. The next theory is a more intellectual one, and it suggests that the events of The Walking Dead mirror the progression of human history. The argument goes something like this. Season 3 of the show represents the Roman Empire. Woodbury, under the governor's control, features gladiatorial combat, when the governor forces Daryl and Merle to fight each other in a ring while the townspeople watch and cheer. The governor himself serves as a Julius Caesar-type figure, a charismatic but ultimately brutal and tyrannical leader. Season 4, with the influenza outbreak at the prison, represents the Black Death of 1346. Terminus, discovered at the end of that season, symbolises the Middle Ages, a dark and desperate period of human civilization. Alexandria represents the aristocracy of the 17th and 18th centuries. Behind its walls, people live in comfort and luxury, with nice houses, running water, and solar panels, while the world outside is brutal and unforgiving. It's essentially a gated community for the elite while everyone else suffers in the wasteland. The Saviour War, with its scale, its alliances, and its devastating consequences, represents the world wars of the 20th century. And the Whisperer War, with its ideological conflict, its espionage, and its cold tension, punctuated by moments of violence, represents the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Now, is this a stretch? Maybe a little, but the parallels are genuinely well drawn, and whoever first proposed this theory put a lot of thought into mapping each era of the show onto a corresponding period of history. The showrunners have never addressed it, so we'll never know if any of this was intentional, but it's a fascinating lens through which to rewatch the series, and it's earned a devoted following on Reddit. And with that, we're well into the second layer of the iceberg. The theories are getting more unusual, more niche, and in some cases more brilliantly observed. We've still got a long way to go before we reach the bottom, so let's keep descending. Now here's a theory that sounds completely ridiculous when you first hear it, but the more you think about it, the more it starts to make a strange kind of sense. And it's the theory that every major character in The Walking Dead is essentially deaf. You know how walkers are constantly sneaking up on our survivors? These are people who have been living in the apocalypse for over a decade. They've fought walkers hundreds of times, maybe thousands. They know the sounds walkers make, the shuffling, the groaning, the dragging of feet, and yet, time and time again, walkers manage to approach our group completely undetected, sometimes getting within arm's reach before anyone notices. It happens so frequently throughout the series that it almost becomes a running joke. How do these experienced survivors keep getting surprised by the loudest, clumsiest predators on the planet? Well, this theory offers an explanation, and it's not supernatural or complicated. It's actually grounded in real-world medical science. The theory, which was first proposed by a Reddit user named Talha1808 over 4 years ago, suggests that the constant use of firearms without any form of ear protection has caused severe hearing loss in the majority of the show's characters. In the real world, this condition is known as shooter's ear, or noise-induced hearing loss, and it is extremely well documented. A single gunshot can produce sound levels between 140 and 170 decibels, which is well above the threshold for permanent hearing damage. Sustained exposure without protection causes cumulative, irreversible damage to the delicate structures of the inner ear. Now think about Rick Grimes specifically. In the very first episode of the show, Rick fires his gun inside a tank. The enclosed metal space would have amplified the sound enormously, and the show actually acknowledges this by having Rick experience temporary hearing loss afterward, clutching his ears in pain. But that's just the beginning. Over the course of the series, Rick fires weapons during the CDC explosion. He shoots Shane at point-blank range in an open field. He fires during the escape from Terminus, during the battle at Alexandria, during the Saviour War, and in dozens of other situations. Never once does he wear ear protection. Multiply that across every character in the group, many of whom have been firing weapons just as frequently, and you end up with a cast of characters who are all suffering from significant hearing impairment. They can't hear walkers sneaking up, because they literally can't hear as well as they used to. The ambient groans and shuffling that would alert a person with normal hearing are simply below the threshold of what their damaged ears can pick up. And here's what makes this theory even more interesting. The show itself features a deaf character, Connie, and she not only survives the apocalypse, she thrives in it. Connie is shown to be an incredibly capable survivor who uses her other senses to compensate for her lack of hearing. Her presence in the show demonstrates that deafness is not a death sentence in this world, and it subtly reinforces the idea that the other characters may be functioning at a similar deficit without even realizing it. I genuinely think this theory has merit. It's clever, it's backed by real science, and it explains one of the show's most persistent logical inconsistencies. Whether the writers intended it or not, it works. The next theory takes us back to season 5 and involves a character named Enid. When we first meet Enid in the episode Remember, she immediately stands out from the other residents of Alexandria. While the people inside those walls have been living in relative comfort and safety, Enid seems different. She's alert, she's capable, and she clearly has survival skills that go well beyond what you'd expect from someone who's been sheltered behind walls. We also learn that she arrived at Alexandria alone, the sole survivor of whatever group she was with before. In 2015, when The Walking Dead was at the peak of its viewership, and fan theories were everywhere, a theory emerged that Enid was actually a spy for the Wolves. The Wolves were a hostile group of scavengers who had been leaving ominous markings across the region, and they would eventually launch a brutal attack on Alexandria in Season 6. The theory suggested that Enid had been planted inside the community ahead of the attack, tasked with learning Alexandria's weaknesses and reporting back to the Wolves. And there was actually some compelling evidence for this. During the Wolves' attack on Alexandria, Enid has a conversation with Carl where she says something that caught everyone's attention. She talks about the community's blind spots, and then she says, "That's how we got in the walls." That word, "we," set off alarm bells across the fan community. It implied that Enid was including herself among the people who got through Alexandria's defences, as if she was one of the attackers rather than one of the defenders. Her behaviour during the siege was also suspicious. While everyone else was panicking and fighting for their lives, Enid showed an unsettling lack of emotion. She seemed detached, almost calm, as if the attack didn't surprise her. And people pointed out that the timing of the Wolves' assault was awfully convenient, occurring while Rick and a large portion of the group were away dealing with a massive walker herd at the quarry. Someone would have had to tip the Wolves off about that window of vulnerability, and Enid was in a position to do exactly that. Of course, we now know this theory was wrong. Enid was never revealed to be a spy for anyone, but the theory was so convincing at the time, and so well supported by evidence from the show, that it became one of the biggest talking points in the fandom during 2015 and 2016. And interestingly, the writers would later use the concept of a community spy with the character of Dante in Season 10, the Whisperer infiltrator inside Alexandria. Some fans even speculate that the Enid spy theory may have inspired the writers to explore that idea. It remains one of the most innovative and well-argued fan theories from the golden era of The Walking Dead. Now, this next theory might be the most extreme one on the entire iceberg, and the people who believe in it have actually given themselves a name. They call themselves Team Delusional. I was first made aware of this community a while back, and I have to say, what I found was both impressive and a little bewildering. Team Delusional is a group of Walking Dead fans who believe, to this day, that Beth Green is still alive. Now, if you watch the show, you know exactly how Beth died. In Season 5, Rick and the group attempt to make a peaceful hostage exchange with a woman named Dawn at Grady Memorial Hospital, but things go sideways. Beth, in a moment of defiance, stabs Dawn with a pair of scissors, and Dawn, either out of reflex or malice, shoots Beth in the head. Beth drops to the ground. Daryl, devastated, carries her body out of the hospital. The group mourns. The audience mourns. It's one of the most gut-wrenching deaths in the entire series. But Team Delusional doesn't buy it. They believe Beth survived the gunshot and that the show's writers have been hiding clues about her eventual return for over a decade. Their evidence is extensive. First, they point to a scene in Season 4, Episode 12, where Beth falls over a mannequin, and they claim that the mannequin's arm is positioned identically to Beth's arm in the death scene, suggesting the body we saw at the hospital was somehow a fake or a stand-in. They also argue that Beth's arm in the death scene resembles the arm of Snow White from the 1937 Disney film, a character who is presumed dead but ultimately comes back to life. As for the gunshot itself, they argue that a crucial portion of the scene was edited out. They point out that when Beth stabs Dawn, Dawn's gun is still visibly in her holster, but in the next cut, it's suddenly in her hand. They claim that the missing footage would explain how Beth could have survived, and that the bullet's trajectory, hitting the top of her forehead, could theoretically have grazed her skull and missed the brain entirely. Then there's the number 8. Before Beth's death, the number 8 allegedly appeared frequently in her scenes, leading some theorists to conclude that it was a symbolic clue that she would return 8 years later. That would have been 2022. She didn't return in 2022. So Team Delusional shifted their expectations to Daryl Dixon, Season 3, which is airing now. If you type Beth is alive theory into YouTube, you'll find multiple videos that are over an hour long, meticulously laying out the case for Beth's survival. These aren't casual fan posts. These are deeply researched, passionately argued presentations by people who have spent years analysing individual frames of footage. Now, do I personally think Beth is alive? No. She was shot in the head at point-blank range, and we saw her body. I think this theory is a product of grief. Beth was a character whose arc felt incomplete, who was taken too soon, and whose death didn't feel earned in the way that other major deaths in the show did. And when a death feels wrong, fans look for ways to undo it. Team Delusional is the most extreme expression of that impulse, and while I think they're wrong, I deeply respect their dedication and their love for the character. Now, the topic of Walker evolution is something that Walking Dead fans have been debating for the entire run of the show, and there have been numerous theories about how the walkers might change over time. Some fans thought walkers would eventually evolve the ability to communicate with each other, organising into something more like a pack of predators than a mindless horde. Others thought they'd regain the use of tools, picking up rocks or sticks the way Frank Darabont's Season 1 walkers occasionally did. And some believed the show would eventually lean back into the horror roots that made Season 1 so effective, with the CRM or other groups running experiments that created super walkers capable of hunting, climbing, and problem solving. As it turns out, the fans weren't entirely wrong. They just had to wait a very long time for it. In Season 11 of the main show, we finally got variant walkers, a type of walker that could climb and even lead hordes. These climbing walkers were a significant escalation from anything we'd seen before. And in the spin-offs, we got even more variety. Dead City gave us the Rat King, a horrifying mass of walkers fused together. Daryl Dixon introduced us to walkers that had been injected with a super serum created by French scientists, making them faster, stronger, and more aggressive. These were called Ampers, and they were genuinely terrifying. And we now know, thanks to the World Beyond post-credits scene and the Daryl Dixon series, that the wildfire virus originated from a biomedical facility in France called La Biomédecine, run by a group known as the Primrose Team. Scientists at this facility created the virus, and when they attempted to cure it, they accidentally created even more dangerous variants. The attempts to fix what they'd broken only made things worse. So the fan theories about Walker evolution were, in a roundabout way, vindicated, not through natural evolution, but through human experimentation. The walkers got worse because people made them worse, which, if you think about it, is a very Walking Dead way for things to unfold. In this franchise, humanity has always been the real monster. There's also a fun crossover theory that's been bouncing around the internet since Season 2, and it links The Walking Dead to another AMC show in a pretty entertaining way. The theory is that The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad exist in the same universe. The evidence is small but amusing. In the early seasons of The Walking Dead, Daryl's brother Merle Dixon is shown using drugs, and the substance he's using appears to be the same blue crystal meth that Walter White produces in Breaking Bad. Later, when Daryl talks about the drug dealer who used to supply Merle, he describes him as this janky little white guy who would say things like, "I'm gonna kill you." Fans immediately pointed out that this description sounds an awful lot like Jesse Pinkman. Then there's the car. In Season 1, Glenn drives a red Dodge Charger during the group's escape from Atlanta. It's the exact same make and model of the car that Walter White is seen with in Breaking Bad. Now, are these intentional connections or just coincidences and shared props between two shows that happen to air on the same network? Almost certainly the latter, but the theory has persisted for over a decade because it's fun, and because the idea that Heisenberg's meth empire operated in the same world as the zombie apocalypse is just entertaining to think about. And then there's a theory that isn't so much a theory as it is a reframing of the entire show, and it asks a question that gets more uncomfortable the longer you sit with it. Are Rick's group actually the good guys? Think about it from the perspective of an outsider. Rick and his people show up at communities, take over leadership roles, kill anyone who stands in their way, and move on to the next place. They arrived at Herschel's farm and essentially invaded it. They took over the prison. When they got to Alexandria, Rick was openly discussing a plan to take the community by force if the residents didn't fall in line. They launched a preemptive attack on the Savior's outpost in Season 6, sneaking in at night and killing people in their sleep, people who had never personally wronged them. The Terminus residents were once good people who were victimized by marauders, and their trauma drove them to cannibalism. It's horrific, yes, but it's also a survival response to unspeakable violence, and Rick's group walked in and slaughtered them. Even the show's title seems to acknowledge this. The Walking Dead doesn't refer to the zombies, it refers to our group. Rick says it himself in that famous scene. We are the Walking Dead. The title is about the living, not the dead. And the living, as the show has shown us again and again, are capable of far worse things than any walker. This isn't so much a theory, as it is a perspective shift, but it's a deeply unsettling one. And it's one that the show's writers seemed very aware of, particularly during Seasons 5 and 6, when Rick's behaviour became increasingly difficult to justify. Alright, we've been in Layer 2 for a while now, and the theories have been getting stranger and more creative with each one. But we haven't hit the bottom yet. Layer 3 is where the truly deep, strange, and sometimes unbelievable theories live. The kind of theories that make you stop and stare at the ceiling for a minute. So let's go deeper. Layer 3, the deepest part of the iceberg. The theories down here aren't the ones you'll find in casual conversation or in a top 10 list on some entertainment website. These are the ones that require a very specific kind of dedication, the kind where someone has watched the same scene 40 times, paused on individual frames, cross-referenced dialogue from episodes that aired years apart, and come to a conclusion that sounds absolutely wild until you hear the evidence. And then it sounds, well, still wild, but in a way that makes you respect the person who thought of it. Let's start with Jim. Jim was a minor character in Season 1 of The Walking Dead, a quiet man who had lost his entire family to walkers and ended up at the survivor camp outside Atlanta, the same camp where Rick reunited with Laurie, Carl, Shane and the others. He wasn't particularly memorable as a character. He didn't get a lot of screen time, and his arc was relatively short. But there's one scene involving Jim that, if you look at it the right way, is genuinely unsettling. In Season 1, Episode 4, an episode titled Vartos, Jim suddenly starts behaving strangely. Without warning and without explanation, he grabs a shovel and starts digging holes in the ground near the camp. Not just one hole, multiple holes. The other survivors are confused and concerned. They try to talk to him, try to get him to stop, and eventually they physically restrain him. Jim seems to come to his senses and can't fully explain why he was digging. He says he had a dream, a feeling, something he can't quite articulate. And then that very night, the camp is attacked by a horde of walkers. It's the first major walker attack in the series, chaotic and terrifying and deadly. 3 people are bitten during the attack and subsequently die. And how many holes did Jim dig? 3. Exactly 3. The camp had been fine for over 2 months, 60 days with no incident of that magnitude. And on the day that Jim suddenly feels compelled to dig graves, the attack happens. And the number of graves matches the number of dead perfectly. The theory that emerged from this is that Jim had some kind of prophetic vision, that he could, in some limited and unconscious way, see the future. His dream wasn't just a bad feeling or anxiety, it was a genuine premonition of the attack that was coming, and it told him exactly how many people would die. Now some people take this theory even further and suggest that Jim actually faked his bite later on in order to separate himself from the group. They believe he wasn't really bitten, that he staged it so the group would leave him behind, because his visions told him he needed to go his own way. There's not much evidence for that particular extension of the theory, but the core idea that Jim foresaw the attack is surprisingly hard to dismiss. Because here's the thing, this was Season 1. This was Frank Darabont's vision of The Walking Dead, and Darabont was clearly interested in exploring a slightly different version of this world than what the show would eventually become. His walkers were smarter. They could use rocks, turn doorknobs, and display rudimentary problem-solving skills. His version of the apocalypse felt more supernatural, more horror-inflected, less grounded in the survivalist realism that would define later seasons. In Darabont's version of The Walking Dead, maybe there was room for something like psychic ability. Maybe Jim's grave digging wasn't just a narrative coincidence. Maybe it was Darabont planting a seed for a subtly supernatural element that would have been explored further if he had stayed with the show. We'll never know, because Darabont was fired after Season 1, and the show went in a very different direction. But the scene remains. Jim digging exactly 3 graves on the exact day that 3 people would die. And nobody in the show ever addresses it or explains it. It just happened. And then the story moved on. It's quietly one of the strangest moments in the entire series. Now the next theory is one of my absolute favourites, and it involves a moment from Season 7 that was so well observed and so cleverly interpreted that it deserved to be true, even though it almost certainly wasn't. This is the Morse code theory. In Season 7, Episode 4, an episode called Service, Negan and the Saviours visit Alexandria for their first collection of supplies. This is early in the Saviour arc, when the threat of Negan is still fresh and raw, and our group is living under his thumb. During this visit, Negan brings Daryl along, still a prisoner, still wearing that grey sweatshirt, being paraded around as a show of power and a warning to Rick and the others. At one point during the episode, there's a shot of Rick and Daryl standing across from each other at a distance. They don't speak. They can't, because Negan is watching. But Daryl does something. He blinks repeatedly, in a pattern. And someone in the fan community noticed that the pattern of Daryl's blinking looks like Morse code. And when they translated it, it spelled out a single word: East. East. As in, the sanctuary, the Saviour's compound, is located to the east of Alexandria. Fans went wild. The theory was that Daryl was covertly communicating the location of Negan's base to Rick using the only method available to him: blinking in Morse code right under Negan's nose. It was resourceful, it was clever, and it was exactly the kind of thing Daryl Dixon would do, and the theory got even stronger when people noticed something else in that same episode. Inside one of the Alexandrian homes, visible on a wall or shelf in the background, was a Morse code chart, an actual reference guide for Morse code, sitting right there in the scene where Daryl was allegedly using Morse code to communicate. The theory spread rapidly. People were convinced. It was one of those perfect fan theory moments where everything lined up, the timing, the evidence, the in-universe logic, and it felt like the writers had crafted a brilliant little Easter egg for observant viewers to discover. But then, in an interview with CBR, the showrunner at the time addressed the theory, and his response was, characteristically, vague and a little deflating. He said something along the lines of, "I think the theory could be correct, just not in this story," which is one of those non-answers that leaves you more confused than before. He then mentioned that he would love to live in a world where Rick and Daryl both intimately knew Morse code and could communicate with each other through blinking, but he said it with a tone that made it clear this was not intentional. The actual explanation. It was a sunny day during filming, and Norman Reedus had the sun in his eyes. That's it. The blinking was just an actor squinting in bright light, and the Morse code chart was a coincidental prop in the background of the scene. A theory built on sunshine and set decoration. And yet, it was so well constructed and so perfectly logical that it became one of the most talked about theories in the entire Walking Dead fandom. Sometimes, the best theories are the ones that feel more intentional than the actual show. Now, the origin of the wildfire virus is something that The Walking Dead deliberately kept mysterious for years. The comics never explained it. The show, for the first 9 seasons at least, kept it ambiguous. Dr. Jenner at the CDC told our group that he didn't know what the virus was, didn't know how to treat it, and wasn't even sure if it was natural, man-made, or, as one character suggested, some kind of divine punishment. But fans had theories from the very beginning, and the 2 most popular ones were population control and super soldiers. The population control theory suggested that the virus was engineered by a government, specifically the French government, as a way to cull and manage a portion of the population. The idea was that someone in a position of power decided that the world had too many people and created a biological agent to reduce the numbers. But the virus escaped containment, mutated beyond anyone's ability to control it, and brought about the end of civilization instead of the controlled reduction that was intended. The super soldier theory took a different angle. It proposed that scientists were trying to create enhanced soldiers, people who wouldn't feel pain, wouldn't need food or water, and could keep fighting long after normal humans would have collapsed. The virus was supposed to suppress certain biological functions and eliminate basic needs, creating a military force that would be virtually unstoppable. But instead of creating super soldiers, the virus killed its hosts and then reanimated them as mindless, flesh-eating monsters. For years, these were just theories, fun speculation with no confirmation either way. And then came The Walking Dead: World Beyond. In the post-credits scene of World Beyond's 2nd season, we finally got something that the franchise had been withholding for over a decade. The scene takes place in a biomedical facility in France, long since abandoned. A scientist from a group called the Violet Team returns to the lab, hoping to continue research on a cure. She encounters an unnamed survivor, a man who clearly knows the truth about what happened in this facility. "You started this," the man tells her, and then he kills her. On the wall behind them, visible in the shot, is a message written in French. Les morts sont nés ici. The dead are born here. From this scene and subsequent revelations in the Daryl Dixon series, we now know that the wildfire virus originated from a French laboratory called La Biomedicine, operated by a research group known as the Primrose Team. The virus was created for experimental purposes, though the exact nature of those experiments has never been fully specified. What we do know is that the Primrose Team travelled to the United States for a conference in Ohio shortly before the outbreak reached pandemic levels, and that a second group of scientists, the Violet team, stayed behind in France. When the Violet team attempted to find a cure, they didn't just fail, they made things worse. Their experiments with the virus led to the creation of variant walkers, more dangerous, more aggressive, faster, and in some cases capable of producing acidic fluids that could burn human flesh. These variants, including the terrifying burner walkers and the artificially enhanced ampers seen in Daryl Dixon, were the direct result of humans trying to fix a problem they created in the first place. So the fan theories about the virus being man-made were essentially correct. The virus came from a lab. It was created by scientists, and humanity's attempts to undo the damage only deepened it. The population control and super soldier theories weren't exactly right in their specifics, but the fundamental idea that this was not a natural disaster but a man-made one turned out to be true. It's one of the rare cases in The Walking Dead where the fans figured it out years before the show confirmed it. Now this next theory is probably the funniest one on the entire Iceberg, and it made me genuinely laugh when I first read it. The theory is that gingers are immune to the wildfire virus. The reasoning is actually pretty straightforward. Across the entire Walking Dead universe, spanning the main show, Fear the Walking Dead, World Beyond, Daryl Dixon, Dead City, The Ones Who Live, and Tales of the Walking Dead, we have seen tens of thousands of walkers on screen. And according to the person who first proposed this theory on Reddit, not a single one of them has been a redhead. Now roughly 2% of the global population has red hair, so statistically, out of the thousands and thousands of walkers we've seen, you'd expect to see at least a few dozen with ginger hair, but the theory claims there are none. 0, which would mean that either gingers are immune to the virus and simply don't reanimate after death, or there's something about their slightly different genetic makeup that allows them to resist the infection in a way that non-gingers can't. The most prominent ginger character in the franchise is of course Abraham Ford, the red-haired military man who became one of the most beloved characters in the show. But Abraham's death doesn't disprove the theory, because he was killed by Negan's bat, Lucille, which destroyed his brain. Since you need an intact brain to reanimate, Abraham's death was the one kind of death that wouldn't test whether or not he was immune. It was almost suspiciously convenient, as if the universe was protecting the secret of ginger immunity. Now, after doing extensive research on this theory, I did manage to find one ginger walker in the entire franchise. One. Her name was Paula, and she appeared in Season 6 as a saviour who captured Carol and Maggie. Carol eventually killed Paula, and she did reanimate on screen, so the theory is technically disproven. But here's the thing, the scene of Paula reanimating lasts less than 2 seconds. It's blink and you'll miss it footage, so you really can't blame the person who created this theory for not catching it. And the fact remains that across the entire Walking Dead universe, there appears to be exactly one ginger walker, one out of what must be tens of thousands. At the very least, gingers are dramatically underrepresented among the undead, and that's a genuinely amusing statistical anomaly. This theory is obviously not meant to be taken seriously, and whoever created it was clearly having fun with it. But it's one of those observations that once you hear it, you can't stop noticing. Every time a walker appears on screen, a little part of your brain is going to be checking the hair colour. The next theory takes us back to the early days of Fear the Walking Dead, specifically the Dave Erickson era, which covers the first 3 seasons. And it suggests that Fear was actually building toward a very specific destination, one that would have tied it directly into the main show in a way that nobody expected. The theory is that the Clark family from Fear the Walking Dead was going to become the Whisperers. The evidence starts with Nick Clark, who was one of the most fascinating characters in the early seasons of Fear. Nick had a deep nick, almost spiritual understanding of walkers. He figured out before anyone else that you could cover yourself in walker blood and walk among the herds undetected. He did it repeatedly, moving through crowds of walkers as if he belonged there. And there was something in the way the show depicted these scenes that felt almost reverential, like Nick was discovering something sacred about the relationship between the living and the dead. And then there was Madison, Nick's mother. During the Erickson era, Madison was being positioned as a morally complex character, someone who was capable of ruthlessness, and who was slowly being pushed toward darker choices by the world around her. Fans started to see the trajectory, and they speculated that fear was building Madison up to become a villain. The theory connected these dots. Nick's knowledge of walking among the dead would provide the foundational concept for the Whisperers. Madison's descent into moral ambiguity would transform her into Alpha, the leader of the Whisperers. And Fear the Walking Dead, rather than being a separate story running parallel to the main show, was actually the origin story of one of the main show's most iconic villain groups. If this had happened, it would have been a brilliant piece of long-form storytelling, connecting two shows across years of television in a way that rewarded viewers who had been watching both from the beginning. But of course, it didn't happen. Dave Erickson left Fear the Walking Dead after season 3, and the new showrunners took the series in a dramatically different direction. Nick was killed off in season 4. Madison was apparently killed off in season 4 as well, though she would later be brought back in season 7. The Whisperers were introduced in the main show with their own entirely separate backstory. And honestly, while I think this theory would have been amazing if it had come true, I'm also glad it didn't. Nick and Alicia Clark were some of the best characters in the Walking Dead franchise, and reducing them to time-skip villains who show up as antagonists in season 9 of the main show would have diminished everything that made them great. Their stories deserved to be their own stories, not prologues to someone else's arc. Although, to be fair, many fans would argue that the post-Erickson seasons of Fear ruined Nick and Alicia's stories anyway, but that's a conversation for a different iceberg. Now, there's another theory from the deeper layers of this iceberg that concerns one of the most popular characters in the franchise, and it's a theory about something that almost happened but didn't, largely because the fans wouldn't allow it. The theory, or rather the persistent rumour, is that Daryl Dixon was supposed to die at various points throughout the show's run. Now, Daryl is interesting because he doesn't exist in the comics. He's an entirely original creation for the television series. Norman Reedus originally auditioned for the role of Merle Dixon, Daryl's older brother, but the part went to Michael Rooker instead. The showrunners liked Reedus so much, though, that they created the character of Daryl specifically for him. And from the very first season, Daryl started growing on people. By season 2, he was one of the most popular characters on the show. By season 3, he was arguably the fan favourite. And because Daryl wasn't in the comics, the writers had no predetermined arc for him. They could do whatever they wanted with the character. He had no comic book death to adapt, no fixed destiny, which meant that, at any point, the writers could have killed him off without deviating from the source material. And according to various rumours and insider discussions that have circulated over the years, there were moments where Daryl's death was considered. Some fans believe it was on the table during season 3, and that's when the famous "If Daryl Dies, We Riot" campaign was born. That phrase became one of the most recognisable slogans in the Walking Dead fandom. People put it on t-shirts, bumper stickers, social media banners everywhere. It was a genuine grassroots fan movement, and it sent a very clear message to the showrunners. And it worked. Whether the writers were genuinely planning to kill Daryl or were just testing the waters, the fan response made it clear that removing him from the show would be catastrophic for the audience. Daryl survived season 3 and 4 and 5 and all the way through to the end of the series. Not only that, but he went on to become the lead of his own spin-off show. The character who wasn't even supposed to exist ended up being the one who outlasted them all. Now, Daryl's survival connects to another theory that emerged during seasons 4 and 5, and this one involves his relationship with Beth Green. During those seasons, particularly in the episode Still and Alone, Daryl and Beth spent a significant amount of time together after the fall of the prison. The two were separated from the rest of the group and had to rely on each other for survival. And during this time, the show developed a bond between them that felt like it was heading somewhere. There were quiet moments, vulnerability, emotional walls coming down. Many viewers interpreted this as the beginning of a romantic connection between the two characters. Emily Kinney, the actress who played Beth, has spoken in interviews about the relationship and hinted that there was a romantic element being developed. And Norman Reedus has made comments over the years that suggested the same thing. But then Beth was killed in the mid-season finale of season 5, and whatever was being built between her and Daryl was abruptly cut short. Her death felt sudden and, to many fans, premature. Beth's character arc seemed incomplete. She was in the middle of growing, of becoming someone, and then she was gone. This sense of unfinished business is a big part of what fuels Team Delusional, the group we talked about earlier, who believe Beth is still alive. For them, the Daryl and Beth connection is central to the theory. They believe that the relationship was interrupted specifically because the writers had a larger plan for Beth, one that involved her disappearing for a time and then returning later in the franchise. Her death was actually the beginning of a longer story, not the end of one. I don't subscribe to that interpretation, but I understand why people feel that way. When a character's arc is cut short before it feels complete, the human instinct is to look for ways to fix it, to find evidence that there's more to the story. That's what Team Delusional is doing. They're refusing to accept an ending that didn't feel right. Moving deeper into Layer 3, there's a theory that exists on the absolute fringe of Walking Dead speculation, and it's the theory that the zombie virus is alien in origin. The idea is that an extraterrestrial civilization, looking to colonize Earth and harvest its resources, engineered a bioweapon designed to wipe out humanity. The virus was delivered to Earth in some manner, perhaps through meteorites, perhaps through atmospheric contamination, and it was untraceable, unstoppable, and perfectly calibrated to destroy human civilization while leaving the planet's infrastructure and natural resources relatively intact. Now, there is essentially zero evidence for this theory in any Walking Dead show, comic, or piece of official media. It exists purely as speculation, fueled mostly by the fact that for years, the franchise refused to explain where the virus came from, leaving the door open for virtually any explanation. Interestingly, Robert Kirkman himself once jokingly hinted at alien involvement in the comics. In an early issue, he included a letter to readers where he teased a possible extraterrestrial origin for the outbreak. It was clearly tongue-in-cheek, and he later walked it back, but the comment was enough to keep the alien theory alive in certain corners of the fan base. Now that we know the virus actually originated in a French laboratory, the alien theory has been pretty definitively put to rest. But for a while there, when the origin was still a mystery, it was one of those wonderfully out there ideas that reminded you how creative fans can be when given an open-ended question. There's a semi-ironic, semi-serious theory that's been floating around for years, and it involves a character that many people probably don't think about very often. The theory is that T-Dog was secretly the most important character in the entire Walking Dead series. T-Dog, played by Arnie Singleton, was a member of Rick's group from the very beginning, present at the original Atlanta camp, and one of the survivors who made it to Herschel's farm and then the prison. But T-Dog was always a background character. He rarely got significant dialogue, his storylines were minimal, and he was often overshadowed by the more prominent members of the group. And then in Season 3, T-Dog was bitten by a walker, and in his final moments, he did something remarkable. He sacrificed himself to save Carol using his body to hold back walkers so that she could escape. It was a brief but unforgettable moment, and it was the last time we ever saw T-Dog alive. But here's where the theory gets interesting. T-Dog's sacrifice directly enabled Carol's survival, and Carol would go on to become one of the most important and formidable characters in the entire franchise. She evolved from an abused, timid woman into a cunning, ruthless, and deeply compassionate survivor who played pivotal roles in nearly every major conflict from that point forward. Carol saved Alexandria from the wolves. Carol played a critical role in the war against the Saviors. Carol was central to the fight against the Whisperers. And Carol travelled to France with Daryl in the Daryl Dixon spin-off. None of that happens if T-Dog doesn't sacrifice himself in that moment. Without his death, Carol dies in Season 3, and the entire trajectory of the show changes dramatically. Characters who survived because of Carol's actions would have died. Battles that were won because of Carol's intervention would have been lost. The ripple effects are enormous. So in a way, T-Dog's single act of sacrifice set off a chain of events that shaped the rest of the Walking Dead story. He may have been a background character during his time on the show, but his death mattered more than almost anyone else's. It's a theory that's partly a joke and partly a genuine observation about how storytelling works. Small moments can have enormous consequences, and the characters who seem least important are sometimes the ones whose actions carry the most weight. There's another theory that connects to the larger mythology of the CRM, and it suggests that the Civic Republic military was watching Rick's group from the very beginning of the series. Throughout the show, there are occasional moments where helicopter sounds can be heard in the background audio. They're subtle, easy to miss, and never addressed by the characters. But fans who went back and listened closely to the sound design of early episodes claim that helicopter noise is present as far back as Season 1. Now we know from later shows in the franchise that the CRM operates an extensive surveillance network. They monitor communities across the continent, tracking populations, assessing resources, and identifying potential threats or assets. They have helicopters, they have ground operatives, and they have the infrastructure to observe groups of survivors from a distance without being detected. The theory suggests that the CRM was aware of Rick's group from the very early days of the apocalypse, that the helicopters heard in the background weren't random noise or sound design choices, but deliberate hints that someone was watching, and that this surveillance is what eventually led to Rick being identified as a valuable asset, which is why Jadis was able to arrange his extraction and delivery to the CRM in Season 9. Is this a stretch? Maybe. Background sound design is notoriously inconsistent in television production, and helicopter noises could easily be the result of filming near flight paths or simply ambient sounds that the editors didn't bother to remove. But the theory fits within the established lore of the CRM, and the idea that this shadow organization had eyes on Rick from the start is both chilling and narratively satisfying. And finally, there's a theory about the origin of the outbreak itself that adds one more layer of ambiguity to a story that's already full of unanswered questions. We've established that the wildfire virus was created in a French laboratory by the Primrose team. That much is confirmed. But the question of how it escaped the lab and became a global pandemic is still not entirely clear. The world beyond post-credits scene provides some clues, but they're open to interpretation. The scientist from the Violet team tells the man who kills her that she wants to end the outbreak, and his response, "You started this," places the blame squarely on the scientists. But then, just before she dies, the scientist says something back to him. She says, "When it happened, when you did what you did." That line is fascinating because it implies dual responsibility. The scientists created the virus, yes, but the man, or the group he represents, did something too. Something that contributed to the virus escaping and infecting the world. The leading interpretation is that a group of vigilantes, possibly predecessors to the pouvoir du vivant movement, seen in Daryl Dixon, learned about the virus being developed in the lab and attacked the facility in an attempt to destroy it or shut it down. But in doing so, they accidentally released the virus, turning a contained experiment into a global catastrophe. If this interpretation is correct, then the blame for the end of the world doesn't fall on a single group. The scientists made the weapon. The vigilantes set it off. Both parties are culpable, and neither can claim clean hands. Which is a very Walking Dead message when you think about it. In this franchise, there are rarely clear heroes and villains. There are just people making choices, and those choices have consequences that ripple outward in ways nobody can predict. The origin of the outbreak remains one of the franchise's most compelling mysteries, and it's fitting that even the confirmed answer leaves room for ambiguity and debate. Some questions don't have clean answers, some stories don't have neat endings, and some icebergs go deeper than you can ever fully explore. Now, we've covered a lot of ground on this iceberg, but there are still some theories tucked away in the corners that deserve attention. Some of these are smaller, some are weirder, and some are the kind of thing that, once you hear them, change the way you look at certain moments in the show. Let's talk about the theory that The Walking Dead was never really about the zombies at all. Now, on the surface, that sounds obvious. Of course, the show's about more than zombies. Everyone knows it's a character drama at its core. But this theory goes further than that. It suggests that the title of the show, The Walking Dead, was never meant to refer to the walkers. It was always meant to refer to the living. And there's a specific scene that supporters of this theory point to as proof. In Season 5, Episode 10, Rick gives a speech to the group while they're sheltering in a barn during a storm. He's exhausted, demoralized, and barely holding it together. And he says something that hits like a freight train. He tells the group that they are the walking dead. Not the walkers, not the monsters outside. Us, the survivors. The people who keep going despite having lost everything. Who stumble forward day after day with no guarantee that tomorrow will be any better than today. Rick is saying that the living have become just as hollow, just as directionless, just as consumed by survival instinct as the dead. The only difference is that their hearts are still beating. Robert Kirkman has said in interviews that the title was always intended to have multiple layers of meaning, and that it was as much about the living as the dead. But the theory takes this further and argues that the entire show is structured as a meditation on what it means to be alive when the world has ended. The walkers are not the antagonists, they're the environment, they're the weather. The real conflict is always between living people and the choices they make. And if you re-watch the show with this lens, it changes everything. The governor isn't scary because of the walkers outside Woodbury. He's scary because of what he does to other human beings. Negan isn't terrifying because of the walker herds. He's terrifying because of the smile on his face while he beats a man to death. The Whisperers aren't threatening because they dress as walkers. They're threatening because they've chosen to give up their humanity entirely. The Walking Dead aren't the zombies. They're the people who've forgotten what it means to be human. And the show's central question, repeated over and over in different forms, is whether Rick and his group can avoid becoming that. Whether they can keep their humanity alive in a world that punishes them for having it. It's less of a theory and more of a philosophical reading of the show, but it's one of the most compelling interpretations out there. Now, there's another small but fascinating observation that fans have made about the show's relationship with animals, particularly regarding the pigs at the prison. In Season 4, when the group is living at the prison, Rick takes on the role of a farmer. He's trying to step away from violence, trying to build something peaceful, trying to be a normal person again. And as part of this, he raises pigs. The pigs are a symbol of his attempt at normalcy, his effort to create a self-sustaining community that doesn't rely on scavenging and violence. But then a flu outbreak hits the prison. People start getting sick, and the show's medical advisor, a character named Dr. Subramanian, suggests that the illness might be spread by feral pigs and birds. the same way diseases were transmitted in the real world before modern sanitation. Rick makes the decision to sacrifice his pigs, slitting their bellies open to use as bait to lure walkers away from the prison fences. And the theory suggests that this moment is loaded with symbolism. Rick isn't just giving up his pigs, he's giving up on his dream of peace. He's sacrificing the domestic, the normal, the hopeful, in order to deal with the violent reality that he's been trying to escape. The pigs represent Rick's attempt at a different life, and killing them represents his acceptance that this life isn't possible. It's a small, quiet theory, but it's the kind of close reading that makes re-watching the show so rewarding. There are layers to these early seasons that don't reveal themselves on a first viewing. You have to sit with the scenes, think about what's being said and what's being shown, and let the meaning develop slowly. There's another theory that comes from the darker corners of the fan community, and it suggests that the wildfire virus doesn't just reanimate the dead, it actually changes people while they're still alive. The basis for this theory is behavioural. Throughout the show, characters who have been living in the apocalypse for extended periods tend to become more aggressive, more impulsive, and more prone to violence than they were before. Rick's transformation from a measured, thoughtful sheriff's deputy into a man who bites another man's throat out to protect his son is the most obvious example. But it's not just Rick. Shane became increasingly unstable and violent. The governor descended into madness. Even characters like Carol, who started as gentle and non-confrontational, evolved into people capable of genuinely frightening acts of violence. The theory suggests that this isn't just the psychological result of living in a traumatic environment, although that's obviously a factor. It proposes that the dormant wildfire virus, which is present in every living person's body, is subtly influencing their behaviour. Not enough to turn them into walkers while they're alive, but enough to lower their inhibitions, increase their aggression, and erode the parts of their personality that might otherwise prevent them from resorting to extreme violence. Think of it like a slow corruption. The virus is in their blood, in their brains, sitting dormant but not inactive. It's nudging them, imperceptibly, toward a more primal, more aggressive version of themselves. The longer they live with the virus, the more it affects them. And the violent, chaotic world they inhabit provides the perfect environment for those impulses to be expressed. This theory is entirely speculative. There's no confirmation from the show or its creators that the virus affects behaviour in the living, but it's a haunting idea because it suggests that the apocalypse isn't just changing people through trauma and circumstance, it's changing them biologically. The virus isn't waiting for death to take over, it's already working. Now there's a theory about the passage of time in The Walking Dead that doesn't get discussed often, but it raises an interesting question. How long has the apocalypse actually been going on? The show's internal timeline is surprisingly compressed compared to what you might expect. The first 9 seasons of the show, from Rick waking up in the hospital to the defeat of the Whisperers and the beginning of the Commonwealth arc, span roughly 10 years of in-universe time. But there are significant time jumps within that span. There's a jump between seasons 2 and 3, another between seasons 8 and 9, and another between seasons 9 and 10. During these jumps, years pass, but the show doesn't show us what happened during those years. Communities were built, relationships developed, children grew up, and the world continued to evolve, but we only see the before and after, not the process. The theory suggests that these time jumps are more significant than the show lets on, that the years we skip over are the years where the really important work happened, the building, the healing, the slow restoration of civilization, and that by skipping them, the show focuses exclusively on moments of crisis and conflict, giving us a distorted view of what life in the apocalypse is actually like. In other words, the apocalypse in The Walking Dead isn't as relentlessly violent and chaotic as the show makes it seem. There are long stretches of relative peace, of rebuilding, of normalcy. The characters have good days and good weeks and good months. The show just doesn't bother to show us those times because they're not dramatic enough. It's a comforting thought, actually, the idea that between the horrors we witness on screen, there were periods of calm, moments where people laughed and ate together and told stories and felt something close to happiness. We don't see those moments because they don't make for compelling television, but that doesn't mean they didn't happen. There's also a fascinating theory about the Civic Republic that connects multiple shows in the franchise and suggests a much larger plan was in motion than anyone realised. The CRM, as we've discussed, is a massive military organisation that operates out of the Civic Republic, a hidden city of roughly 200,000 survivors. They have helicopters, soldiers, scientists, and an infrastructure that dwarfs anything else we've seen in the Walking Dead universe. And their methods are, to put it mildly, morally questionable. They destroyed the city of Omaha and its neighbouring campus colony, killing over 100,000 people to eliminate what they perceived as drains on their resources. The theory suggests that the CRM's activities weren't random or reactive. They were part of a deliberate, long-term strategy to consolidate power and resources across the North American continent. The A and B classification system, the trading of human subjects, the destruction of rival communities, all of it was part of a calculated plan to ensure that the Civic Republic would be the dominant civilization in the post-apocalyptic world. And according to this theory, the CRM was working on this plan from the very early days of the outbreak. The helicopter sounds in the early seasons, the mysterious PPP cards, Jadis's trading operation, all of these were tendrils of the CRM's influence, reaching out into the wider world, gathering intelligence, acquiring assets, and eliminating potential threats. It paints a picture of the Walking Dead universe that's much more organised and much more sinister than it appears on the surface. Behind the chaotic, day-to-day struggle of survival that our characters experience, there was a massive organisation pulling strings, making plans, and shaping the future of humanity according to its own vision. The ones who live ultimately brought the CRM's reign to an end, with Rick and Michonne exposing the corruption within the military and triggering a reform of the Civic Republic. But the theory suggests that the CRM's influence left lasting marks on the world that will continue to be felt in future Walking Dead stories. And then there's a theory that's as simple as it is profound, and it concerns the one thing that connects every single character in the Walking Dead universe. Not the virus, not the walkers, not even survival. It's grief. Every character in this franchise is grieving something. Rick grieves for the world he knew, for the normalcy that was stolen from him, for the friends and family he's lost. Daryl grieves for Merle, for Beth, for the childhood he never had. Carol grieves for Sophia, for Lizzie and Mika, for the person she used to be. Maggie grieves for Glenn, for Herschel, for a future that was taken from her before it could begin. Negan grieves for Lucille, his wife, whose death set him on the path to becoming a monster. The theory suggests that grief is the true central theme of The Walking Dead. Not survival, not community, not the conflict between good and evil. Grief. Every major decision a character makes, every alliance formed and broken, every act of violence and every act of mercy can be traced back to loss. The characters aren't just fighting walkers and hostile groups. They're fighting the weight of everything they've lost, trying to find reasons to keep going when the people and things they loved most are gone. And the walkers themselves are the ultimate expression of grief made physical. They are the dead who won't stay dead, the losses that refuse to be laid to rest. They wander the earth as constant reminders of what was lost, and they will never stop coming. You can kill them, but there will always be more. The grief never ends. It just changes form. It's a beautiful and devastating reading of the show, and it explains why The Walking Dead resonated with so many people, despite being a genre show about zombies. Because underneath all the horror and the action and the drama, it's about something universal. It's about how we carry our losses with us and how those losses shape who we become. Before we begin to close this iceberg out, there are a handful more theories that deserve a spot in the deepest layer. The kind of observations that viewers tend to walk right past, but that, once pointed out, you can never quite forget about. There's one about Shane Walsh that I find particularly interesting. It's not a wild conspiracy theory or a dramatic reinterpretation of the show's events. It's more of a subtle character reading that changes how you think about one of the earliest and most important relationships in the series. The theory is that Shane was never truly Rick's friend, that even before the apocalypse, their relationship was based on competition and resentment rather than genuine affection, and that the outbreak simply accelerated a conflict that was always going to happen. If you go back and rewatch the very first conversation between Rick and Shane in the show, the one where they're sitting in the police cruiser eating burgers, there's something slightly off about Shane's demeanour. He's talking with Rick, sure, and on the surface it looks like two friends having lunch. But there are subtle cues. Shane steers the conversation toward Laurie in a way that feels probing rather than supportive. He's fishing for information about the state of Rick and Laurie's marriage. And when Rick opens up about their problems, about Laurie accusing him of not caring about his family, there's a flicker of something in Shane's reaction that isn't quite sympathy. The theory suggests that Shane had feelings for Laurie long before the apocalypse, that he'd been watching Rick and Laurie's marriage from the sidelines, waiting for it to crack, and that Rick's coma and the subsequent collapse of civilization simply gave him the opportunity he'd been hoping for. When Shane told Laurie that Rick was dead, was he genuinely mistaken, or was he making a calculated choice to remove Rick from the picture? The show leaves this ambiguous enough that both interpretations are valid. Shane did check on Rick in the hospital. He did put his ear to Rick's chest and not hear a heartbeat. But did he try hard enough? Did he check more than once? Or did some part of him decide, in that moment, that letting Rick go was easier and more convenient than fighting to save him? It's a dark reading of the character, but it's not an unreasonable one. And it adds a layer of complexity to the Rick and Shane dynamic that makes their eventual confrontation feel even more inevitable. These weren't just two friends torn apart by the apocalypse. There was something broken between them long before the first Walker ever appeared. There's also a theory about Herschel's farm that relates to the broader mythology of the show in a way that's easy to overlook. The theory suggests that Herschel's farm was never randomly discovered by our group. It was always meant to be found. In the show, Rick and the group end up at the farm because Carl is accidentally shot by Otis while the group is searching for Sophia on the highway. Maggie rides up on horseback, tells Laurie that Carl has been hurt, and directs the group to the farm. It feels coincidental, a fortunate accident that brings our characters to a place of temporary safety. But the theory reads it differently. It suggests that the farm represents a kind of moral way station in the story, a place where the characters are forced to confront fundamental questions about life, death, and what it means to be human in this new world. Herschel keeps walkers in his barn because he believes they can be cured. He sees them as sick people, not monsters, and the conflict between Herschel's compassion and Shane's pragmatism, between the belief that the dead are still people and the certainty that they are not, is the defining philosophical debate of the entire series. Every major conflict in The Walking Dead can be traced back to this question. Do we treat the dead with dignity, or do we treat them as threats? Do we extend mercy to strangers, or do we protect our own at all costs? Do we hold on to our humanity, or do we sacrifice it for survival? The farm is where these questions are first asked in earnest, and every season that follows is an attempt to answer them. It's less of a fan theory and more of a literary analysis, but it's the kind of observation that reveals the show's deeper architecture. The Walking Dead isn't just a survival story, it's a philosophical argument about what human beings owe each other when the social contract has been destroyed. And speaking of the farm, there's a smaller theory connected to it that has to do with Sophia's time in the barn. When Sophia went missing in Season 2, the group spent multiple episodes searching for her. It was one of the longest sustained storylines in the early seasons, and fans at the time were frustrated by the slow pace of the search. But then came the mid-season finale, when the barn doors opened and walker after walker stumbled out. Until finally, at the very end, Sophia emerged, having been a walker the entire time our group had been looking for her. The theory suggests that Herschel knew Sophia was in the barn, that at some point during the search, he or one of his family members found Sophia as a walker and placed her in the barn with the others, but deliberately chose not to tell Rick's group. Herschel believed the walkers could be cured. He was keeping them alive because he thought a solution would come eventually. Telling Rick that Sophia was already dead and in the barn would have destroyed the search, devastated the group, and possibly led to the barn being opened by force, which is exactly what eventually happened. So Herschel stayed silent. He let Rick's group search for a girl who was already dead, feet away from them, because he wasn't ready to give up hope that she could be saved. It's a heartbreaking interpretation, and it makes Herschel's character even more tragic than the show already depicted him as. His compassion and his denial were inseparable. There's a final deep-cut theory that I want to mention before we wrap up, and it's about the structure of the show itself rather than any specific plot point. The theory is that each season of The Walking Dead represents a stage of grief. Season 1 is denial. Rick wakes up in a world that has fundamentally changed, and he can't accept it. He clings to the hope of finding his family, the hope that things will go back to normal, the hope that someone somewhere has a cure. The season ends at the CDC, where that last shred of hope is literally blown to pieces. Season 2 is anger. Shane's rage dominates the season. The group is angry at the world, angry at each other, angry at the situation they're in. The farm becomes a pressure cooker of resentment and frustration, and it culminates in violence. Season 3 is bargaining. The prison represents Rick's attempt to negotiate with fate. If they can just find a safe place, if they can just build walls strong enough, if they can just keep the bad things out, then maybe everything will be okay. But the governor proves that no amount of bargaining can protect you from human evil. Season 4 is depression. The prison falls. The group is scattered. Beth sings mournful songs. Rick can barely function. The season is suffused with exhaustion and despair, culminating in the horror of Terminus and the realization that the world is even crueler than they thought. And Season 5 onward is acceptance, not happy acceptance, but the grim recognition that this is the world now, and the only choice is to keep moving forward. Rick accepts who he has to be. Carol accepts what she's capable of. The group accepts that safety is temporary and loss is permanent. They stop hoping for the world to go back to the way it was and start focusing on building something new. Now, this framework doesn't map perfectly onto every season. The later seasons are harder to categorize, and the show's quality varied significantly over its run. But the early seasons, 1 through 5, align remarkably well with the 5 stages of grief. And it's a reading of the show that gives those seasons an elegant emotional structure. Whether the writers intended this or not, it works. And it reinforces the idea that The Walking Dead, at its best, was never really about zombies. It was about people processing loss, both personal and collective, and trying to find meaning in a world that had been stripped of everything familiar. And with that, we've reached the bottom of the iceberg. We've covered theories that span the entire Walking Dead franchise, from the main show's 11 seasons to Fear the Walking Dead, World Beyond, Daryl Dixon, Dead City, The Ones Who Live, and Tales of the Walking Dead. We've talked about theories that were proven right, theories that were proven wrong, and theories that remain beautifully, frustratingly unanswered. We started at the surface with the well-known theories, the ones that almost every fan has encountered. The elderly Carl narration theory, the walkers rotting away, Heath's disappearance, and the PPP card, the whisperer spy inside Alexandria. These are the theories that defined the mainstream conversation around the show for years. Then we descended into Layer 2, where things got more obscure and more creative. The orange backpack curse, the human history parallels, the deaf survivors theory, the Enid as a wolf spy theory, and the passionate dedication of Team Delusional. These are the theories that required closer attention, deeper knowledge, and a willingness to look at familiar scenes from unfamiliar angles. And finally, we reached Layer 3, the deepest and strangest part of the iceberg. Jim the Prophet, the Morse code theory, the confirmed French lab origin, the ginger immunity hypothesis, and the philosophical readings that reframe the entire show as a meditation on grief, humanity, and the cost of survival. Some of these theories were brilliant, some were absurd, a few were so well constructed that the creators of the franchise had to personally step in and say, no, that's not what we meant. And a handful of them turned out to be true, proving that sometimes the fans understand a story better than the people telling it. What I love about fan theories is that they're really just a different form of love for the source material. Every theory on this iceberg, no matter how far-fetched, started with someone caring enough about The Walking Dead to look deeper, to ask questions, to wonder what if. That hitchhiker's orange backpack, Morgan's 2 candles, Daryl's blinking in the sunlight. These are tiny details in a massive decade-long story, and the fact that people noticed them, thought about them, and built entire theories around them tells you something about the power of this franchise and the depth of its community. The Walking Dead may have ended its original run, but the universe is still expanding, still telling stories and still generating theories. Somewhere right now, someone is watching an episode of Daryl Dixon and noticing something in the background that will spark the next great fan theory. And when they post it online, a community of people will gather around it and debate its merits, just like they have for the past 15 years. The iceberg never stops growing. If you've made it this far, thank you for spending this time with me. Whether you're still awake and fully engaged, or whether you drifted off somewhere around the Ginger Walker theory, and my voice has just been a warm hum in the background of your sleep, I appreciate you being here. The Walking Dead brought a lot of people together over the years, and even something as simple as sitting here and talking through these theories feels like a continuation of that community. So wherever you are, however you're feeling, I hope this was a good way to spend your evening. The iceberg isn't going anywhere. The theories will still be here tomorrow. And the Walking Dead universe, with all its mysteries and unanswered questions and passionate fans, will keep giving us things to talk about for a long time to come. Take care of yourselves, rest well, and if you happen to see a Ginger Walker out there, let me know, because apparently there's only been one in the entire history of this franchise, and I'd love to know if there's a second. Good night. Actually, before we fully close out Layer 3, there are a few more observations and theories from the deeper reaches of the internet that I want to touch on, because they're the kind of thing that adds richness to a rewatch, and they deserve to be mentioned in an iceberg as thorough as this one. There's a theory about the character of Father Gabriel Stokes that I think is underappreciated. When we first meet Gabriel in Season 5, he's hiding inside his church, having locked his congregation outside during the initial outbreak, listening to them scream as walkers tore them apart. Gabriel chose his own survival over the lives of the people who trusted him, and he's been carrying that guilt ever since. The theory suggests that Gabriel's entire arc across the rest of the series is an extended act of penance. Every dangerous situation he puts himself in, every time he volunteers for a mission that could get him killed, every reckless decision he makes, it's all driven by the same impulse. He doesn't actually believe he deserves to survive. He locked those church doors, and a part of him has been trying to die ever since, not through suicide, but through sacrifice, hoping that one day he'll be given the chance to lay down his life for someone the way he failed to do for his congregation. And if you trace Gabriel's journey through the series with this theory in mind, it actually fits remarkably well. He gradually becomes braver, more willing to take risks, more eager to put himself in harm's way. By the later seasons, he's one of the group's most reliable members in a fight. But is that courage? Or is it guilt wearing the mask of courage? Is he running toward danger because he's found his strength, or because some part of him is still looking for the death that will balance the scales? It's a reading of the character that makes his moments of heroism more complicated and more human. And it's the kind of theory that the show probably never consciously intended, but that works perfectly within the framework of the story. There's another observation about the show that doesn't get discussed enough, and it concerns the role of children throughout the series. Specifically, the theory that the show uses children as moral barometers for the world around them. Think about it. When the world is relatively stable and our group is in a place of safety, the children in the show are allowed to be children. They play, they laugh, they go to school. They have something resembling a normal childhood. We see this at Alexandria, at the Hilltop, and at the Commonwealth. The presence of happy, healthy children signals that things are, for the moment, okay. But when the world becomes dangerous, the children change. They become hardened, violent, or disturbed. Carl, in the later seasons, is a very different person from the Carl of season 1. Lizzie's disturbing behaviour at the prison is a direct reflection of the horror that surrounds her. The children at the Terminus flashbacks are shown being brutalised, foreshadowing the brutality that the adults would later inflict on others. The theory is that the writers use children as indicators of the moral health of the world. When children are thriving, the world is healing. When children are suffering or becoming violent, the world is at its worst, and the show's most devastating moments almost always involve children, because harming a child's innocence is the ultimate signal that things have gone terribly wrong. Carl's death in season 8, Sophia's emergence from the barn, Lizzie's murder of Mika, Judith's near-death experiences, Finch's infection in fear, the children of the Whisperers raised in a cult of death. Every one of these moments hits harder than an adult character's suffering, because children represent the future, and when the future is damaged, it means the present has truly failed. It's a structural observation rather than a conspiracy theory, but it's one of those things that, once you see it, you realise the writers were doing something very deliberate with the children in this show. They weren't just side characters, they were the show's conscience. There's also a small but charming theory about Glenn Rhee that I want to mention. Glenn was famously one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise, a resourceful, brave, and fundamentally good person who brought levity and heart to a world that desperately needed both. And his death at the hands of Negan in the season 7 premiere was one of the most devastating moments in television history. The theory is about Glenn's signature phrase, "Hey dumbass." The very first words Glenn ever speaks in the show are directed at Rick, who is trapped inside a tank in downtown Atlanta, surrounded by walkers. Over the radio, Glenn's voice crackles to life with a simple, irreverent, utterly Glenn greeting. "Hey dumbass, yeah, you in the tank." Fans have pointed out that this moment establishes something that remains true for Glenn's entire time on the show. He is always the voice that reaches people when they're at their lowest. He's the person who finds you when you're surrounded and pulls you out. He did it for Rick in the tank. He did it for the group countless times after that. Glenn was the character who never gave up on people, never stopped believing that things could get better, and never lost the part of himself that could look at a hopeless situation and say something that made you smile. The theory suggests that Glenn's death wasn't just devastating because we loved the character. It was devastating because with him died the last pure voice of optimism in the show. After Glenn was gone, The Walking Dead got darker. The humour dried up. The lightness that Glenn brought to the group evaporated. And while other characters tried to fill that role, Judith inherited some of it. Eugene grew into it. Nobody ever fully replaced what Glenn represented. He was the show's heart. And the Season 7 premiere didn't just kill a character, it killed a feeling. That sense that no matter how bad things got, there was someone in the group who could look at it and find a reason to keep going. Glenn was that reason for a lot of people, both in the show and watching it, and I think that's why his death hit so hard. It wasn't just grief for Glenn, it was grief for the version of The Walking Dead that existed when he was alive. A version that was tougher, yes, and brutal, but that also had hope running through it like a thread. When Glenn died, that thread was cut, and the show never quite found it again. There's one last observation I want to share before we truly close this out, and it's about the recurring motif of doors in The Walking Dead. Doors appear throughout the series as symbols of choice. Rick's story begins with him pushing through the hospital doors into a world that has ended. The barn doors at Herschel's farm swing open to reveal the truth about Sophia. The doors of Terminus close behind our group as they realise they've walked into a trap. The gate at Alexandria swings open for the first time, offering the promise of safety. Cell doors at the prison, the doors of the sanctuary, the church doors that Gabriel locked on his congregation. Every major turning point in the series is marked by a door opening or closing, and the theory suggests that this isn't coincidental. Doors represent thresholds, moments where characters pass from one state of being into another. Walking through a door in The Walking Dead means leaving something behind and entering something new. Sometimes it's hope, sometimes it's horror, but it's always a point of no return. The very last scene of the original series features a door, and the spin-offs continue the motif. Daryl crossing into new territories, Rick and Michonne breaking free from the CRM, new communities opening their gates to strangers. The doors keep appearing because the show is fundamentally about transitions, about crossing from one world into another, about the choices that define who we are. And every time a character stands in front of a closed door in The Walking Dead, the audience instinctively knows that what's on the other side will change everything. Because in this world, it always does. Alright, now we've truly reached the bottom. This iceberg stretched across the full breadth of the Walking Dead universe, from the surface theories that every fan knows, through the mid-layer observations that require a deeper knowledge of the show, all the way down to the philosophical readings and structural analyses that reveal what this franchise is really about, underneath the Walker makeup and the survival drama. Thank you for being here for all of it. Whether you listen to every word or let my voice carry you to sleep somewhere along the way, I'm glad you spent this time in the world of The Walking Dead with me. These theories, these observations, these tiny details that people noticed across 15 years of storytelling, they're a testament to the power of this franchise and the community it built. Rest easy. The walkers will still be there in the morning. But for now, everything is quiet. Good night. And actually, while we're in this reflective space near the end of the iceberg, there's one more thing I want to touch on. It's not a theory exactly, but it's an observation that ties together so many of the theories we've discussed tonight, and I think it's worth sitting with for a moment. Throughout this entire iceberg, from layer 1 all the way down to layer 3, there's a common thread that connects nearly every theory we've covered. And that thread is the idea that things are not what they seem. The elderly Carl narration theory suggests the show we're watching isn't happening in real time. The coma theory suggests it's not happening at all. The Whisperers in Season 2 theory suggests characters we thought were walkers might have been people. The Rick immunity theory suggests the protagonist might be fundamentally different from everyone around him. The orange backpack theory suggests a prop is carrying a hidden meaning. The Morse code theory suggests a blink is actually a message. The virus origin theories suggest the apocalypse was not an accident. Every one of these theories is built on the same foundation: the belief that there is a deeper layer of truth beneath what we're shown on screen, that the writers are communicating something through subtext, through symbolism, through details so small that only the most dedicated viewers would catch them. And maybe that's why fan theories resonate so deeply with people. It's not just about the show, it's about the human desire to find meaning in the details, to believe that things happen for a reason, and that if you look closely enough, you can find the hidden architecture that holds everything together. The Walking Dead gave people a world that was chaotic and terrifying and seemingly random, and the fan community responded by insisting that there was order within the chaos, patterns within the randomness, intentional design within what appeared to be coincidence. They looked at a prop in the background and saw a curse. They listened to a madman's ramblings and heard a prophecy. They watched a man blink and decoded a secret message. That instinct, the refusal to accept the surface of things, the determination to dig deeper, is what created every single theory on this iceberg. And it's the same instinct that makes The Walking Dead such a rich show to revisit, even years after the original series ended. Because there's always something you missed. There's always a detail you didn't notice, a connection you didn't make, a moment that means something different the second or third or fourth time you see it. The iceberg goes deeper than any single video can explore. And no matter how many theories we cover, there will always be more waiting to be discovered. That's the beauty of a show that ran for this long and meant this much to this many people. It becomes bigger than itself. It becomes a shared mythology that the community builds together, one theory at a time, one observation at a time, one late-night Reddit post at a time. And in a way, every person who ever posted a Walking Dead fan theory online was doing the same thing that the characters in the show were doing. They were looking at a world that seemed beyond understanding, and they were trying to make sense of it. So to every person who ever wrote a Walking Dead theory, no matter how mainstream or obscure, no matter how brilliant or bonkers, thank you. You made the show better by caring about it enough to look beneath the surface. And tonight, we got to explore the incredible results of that collective curiosity. The iceberg rests now, but it'll be here when you come back. Sleep well.